time. Some win, some lose. Some of all just think the blues. What a movie we're in. You're going on in Spain, got waiting. Look, look, and shadows, searching. Sweet like fever. In the sun, somewhere. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll just be back in 1 minute. So if we can get everyone back in their seats, please, thank you very much. And we will start session 3 on the front line addressing the patient flow challenge. Just to welcome everyone back, first of all, I had a quick look on Twitter. I think we're about number 6 trending at the minute. Fine Gael are trending for some reason. I'm afraid to look. I don't know what happened. Michael O'Leary may have crashed a plane into somebody or something. I don't know. But so if we can just get everyone back in and settled, this part, I suppose, we talked about earlier on the front line, addressing the patient flow challenge. And what I'd like you to think about is, as you listen to the speakers here, I suppose, what are the real practical challenges that your colleagues are dealing with, and how they're coming up with them and addressing them as well. So our first speaker I'd like to introduce is the operational lead in complex case management in Team HSE Cork Kerry Community Healthcare. I did hear a couple of Cork people at the coffee break saying, where was the Barry's tea? So I don't know if our next speaker was indeed one of those people. I'd like to introduce Yvonne Cashman. And Yvonne will be presenting in the role of the complex case management team, including the integration between acute and community services to proactively manage complex cases. And I think that's a phrase we've already heard before lunch as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Yvonne Cashman.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the invite to attend today. It's a privilege to be invited. I mightn't feel like that right now, but I'm sure I will once we're finished. So we'll start off. So I suppose just the background to the complex case management team. So the principles of complex case management team are guided by Sloan to Care for right care at the right place and at the right time. And I suppose this was the brainwave really of Priscilla Lynch and Mary O'Donovan, who were previously our head of service for primary care and also our ECC manager. And this was a pilot that started 2 years ago in November 2022. And the real aim and objective was to manage cases to facilitate timely discharges from the acute services for complex patients from the age of 18 to 65. So we act as a central point of referral for all of those cases once they meet our criteria from the acute services. And we try to enable a seamless integration with the community networks and the community teams and also all other stakeholders. Following discharge from the acute hospitals, CCMT continued to case manage cases in complex cases in step-down units, following up with reviews of their care and also review of the funding towards them. So our main aim is to stratify risks, identify a plan for discharge and implement the plan. And that's through a continuation of coordination with our colleagues in both the acute, the community and all of the stakeholders. We all know the barriers to discharge. I'm sure there's nobody in the room that hasn't heard all of these before. So medical complexity, lack of decision making, lack of caregiver, financial barriers and social barriers such as housing, for example, are the predisposing factors. So when we look at our criteria and our inclusion, so it's the 18 to 65 age group. Now, sometimes on certain occasions, we will accept over 65, but generally the rule is under 65. These patients must reside in the Cork and Kerry area. So their return address, their discharge address must be Cork and Kerry, and they meet the complex case definition of CCMT. Predominantly, these patients are based in CUH, MUH, South Infirmary Victoria, UHK, and NRH. So it's the acute hospital settings, but we also do work with Manor General Hospital and Bantry General Hospital, as well as the transitional care beds, from where some of our patients transition from the acute services while they're waiting for the completion of their discharge. As I said already, our exclusion criteria is for those outside of Cork and Kerry. When we move on to the profile for our complex cases, the profile is very wide, and oftentimes it constitutes various factors together which actually make up the complexity. So we don't often have somebody with just a mild intellectual disability. There's often another component, more often than not. So our criteria is persons with mild intellectual disabilities classified as homeless with complex care needs, persons requiring long-term residential placement as a result of complex care needs, challenging behaviours, or anything that prevents them from living independently. Persons with acquired brain injury, be that accident related or be it drug related or alcohol related. Those with severe and enduring mental illness with a high level of frailty and underlying medical conditions or medical comorbidity. And then our patients with high level of complex physical health care needs, physical illness, and who are in an acute hospital setting awaiting discharge to the community or to home. And again, that cohort of patients would predominantly be the spinal injuries, or patients as a result of an accident who have had a catastrophic injury that require significant care on discharge. And as I said already, patients who've transferred from the transitional care from the acute setting. So our team, it's small, but it works. So it's myself, Yvonne Cashman, and then I have Principal Social Worker Sinead Lawless as a member of our team as well. And Sinead brings a wealth of information from her background working with mental health and particularly with homeless and housing. So we're very lucky to work with Sinead. In addition to this, we have a weekly meeting where we have representatives to the complex case management team. And those representatives include the Assistant Director of Public Health Nursing, who represents primary care. We have a senior person from the social inclusion. We have an ADPHN from mental health. We have the project operational lead for disability services. We have the continuing care place coordinator. And then we have senior representatives from Cork County Council and Cork City Council, along with Kerry County Council. And this forum is where we discuss our weekly cases and we tease out what we can do together and collaboratively to try and escalate their cases, to progress the cases from the acute setting out to home. And that really is a key component of our work, and it's where a lot of decisions are made, where there's a lot of integrated thoughts, thinking and progress, and it works really, really well. And I have to say, on behalf of the team, we really welcome all of those representatives and the wealth of information and ability to progress our cases forward, because without them we wouldn't be able to progress. So we then move on to our process. So our process, really, we receive our referral, we look at the patient, we meet the patient, we discuss with the relevant care persons. And again, here is where our integration with the acute settings in particular, it works really well. We work very well with the discharge coordinators in all of the acute hospitals, and it works really, really well. We identify the barriers for the patient and we determine what can we do now to try and reduce or, to try and get the person on the way home. We look at a service solution. We might bring that to the weekly forum meeting with the representatives of the CCMT. We organise an MDT with the stakeholders who are involved. And then we try and, ensure that the patient can move on. If we face a barrier that we find that we can't come on, then or that we can't overcome, then we will escalate that to the head of service for discussion at the CHO management meeting. When we look at our breakdown of referrals, and I would have to acknowledge Louise Martin for her efforts and data, which is fantastic for our team. We looked at our referrals from a period of December 2022 to February 2024. So at that time, we had 20% of our cases were active. Complex home support, nursing care and nursing needs was 39% of our referrals. and the delayed transfer of care related to those 3,586. When we look at our residential care facilities, those patients waiting care facilities, 2,506 detox days. Housing and homeless was 14% of our referrals, again reflecting in 2,765 delayed transfer of care days. Disability placement was 3.5%. Again, this resulted in 1,771 detox or delayed transfer of care. Home adaptations was 2%, resulting in 699 delayed transfer of care, and mental health was 1%, and that was 522. So I suppose it's just important to note that while the under 65s on the detox lists have a lot lower numbers in persons, they often tend to have a higher day on the detox actual list. Of the breakdown of our referrals, then from the age group of 36 to 45, we had 13% of referrals. 46 years to 55 was 30% of the referrals, and then 56 to 65 was 41% of our overall referrals. So, in order to integrate and offer a collaborative approach, a lot has changed in terms of improving the management of complex patients between the acute and the community services. And this involves weekly meetings with the head of service, which are held to mitigate barriers to discharge and to develop integrated solutions which facilitate successful discharges from the acute hospital. So, as members of the CCMT, we have bi-weekly meetings with the discharge coordinators and the acute team, which you'll see there on the right-hand side box, from the bed managers, patient flow managers, discharge coordinators and social workers, where we discuss the cases on detox, we discuss the progress that's been made, and any other information then which is available from the discharge coordinators with updates with regards to those places, with regards to those patients, I beg your pardon, is brought to those meetings. And that's a really successful meeting because it's short, it's sharp, but you get the information, and there is there's a continuation of updates from ourselves to all of those involved as well. These meetings are both strategic and operational, and if you look at the map there, you'll be able to see as well that these escalation meetings take place with the heads of service and also the general managers, where again, if barriers are of discharge are encountered, they're referred to the GM and head of service meeting. And this ensures that there's more of an integrated collaborative approach taken across all divisions within community care, because at this point you have representatives from both acute and community meeting together to discuss and tease out an integrated approach to progressing the discharge planning of patients. Integration, and it is all about integration, and today is all about integration. And I suppose we only work well because we're integrated with the acute services and with the community services. From my perspective, in terms of the acute hospital settings, I can't speak highly enough, and my colleagues are here from the acute services today in regards to the discharge coordinators and the bed managers, who really from the very beginning have been involved, and we've all worked together to be able to promote best patient care, safe discharges, and in a timely manner. We started a baseline, we all came together, communicated, pathways were developed, workshops were undertaken in regards to understanding the role of the community and also those members in the hospital. We have a central referral form, which is proved to be very beneficial in terms of reducing the duplication of forms and referrals. And again, that has reduced the workload, I suppose, in terms of it's one referral for all community services. We attend the MDT meetings along with our colleagues in the acute service. We've on-site assessment of patient care needs. We've bi-weekly meetings with the acute hospital discharge coordinators, with the social workers. We have a weekly meeting. It's a virtual, it's a telecon with the social workers. It's literally 15 minutes, but everybody is kept very much up to speed on how the progress with regards to discharge is happening. And there's great communication, and it works really, really well. Then when we come to our community services, again, with regards to integration with the community services, I would have to say that the primary care teams, mental health services, social inclusion, everybody is very willing to try and participate to improve patient care and outcome. And we looked at, when we first started, we had education sessions with all of the community network teams, with the primary care teams, just so that everybody has an understanding of what our role was, how we worked, how we would be engaging, why we will be engaging at an infancy. And I suppose the main part here that I find is beneficial, having worked as a community public health nurse myself, is that it's the early awareness of the patient. So informing the community, we have a complex patient. He may not be going home for about 3 months, but he's going to need a significant home care package. And that's where you can plan from a much earlier stage. You're not then coming to the point of discharge and you're looking for a significant home care package. It's in place. The awareness has been risen. You're not able to give a PDD for definite, but you're able to say, okay, this patient is going to be going home. They're going to need a significant package. Again, with regards to housing adaptation, housing grants, we raise these patients because we're aware of them from a much earlier point. We're able to raise them with the councils. We're able to advise the families to put in the housing adaptation grant. So therefore, it reduces the time frame that they're waiting. So it's all about the early referral and raising the awareness of the patient at an early stage. It really is integral to providing collaboration and a coordinated approach. And ultimately, it is patient-centred care, and that's what we're all focused on. I suppose since the development of the CCMT, the feedback has been that there's enhanced communication with regards to complex cases between required services. The relevant teams are notified by the CCMT if a complex patient is admitted, giving ample time to facilitate discharge. And again, we link in with the relevant teams and the PHNs on a regular basis, updating them as to the current status of the patient. For example, when I move on to the next slide, we'll talk about our discharges from the NRH. So I suppose when CCMT first started in November of 2022, we had 4 patients who were in one of our acute hospitals who had been to the NRH, but they had now returned to the acute hospital setting post their rehabilitation because there was a barrier to discharge. The barriers were home care packages, provision of neurogenic bowel management. So I suppose when we looked at that, we kind of felt, well, what can we do to try and improve this? And this is where we engage very positively with NRH, with Claire Convery and her social work team, discussing how can we make it better. So the patient would be referred to the complex case management team before when they went to the acute service. Then they were waiting to go to the NRH. So at that stage, we had started planning their discharge from NRH, even though they hadn't even gone there. But it was really about housing adaptation grants. It was one of our big key, and housing adaptation. So Claire and myself, we met, we a couple of meetings, and we decided that a bi-weekly meeting to discuss the patients in NRH would work really well. And I have to say, it has been fundamental in changing the outcome of patients. So I suppose when we look at it now, the improvements to patient flow with regards to the NRH, we've had 27 patients go to the NRH. Only one of those patients has had to return to the acute hospital setting from the NRH, okay? And that gentleman was actually requiring long-term care. He was over 65 by the time he came back, but it was a very, very complex case from a social perspective. Of those 27, 16 of those patients were discharged directly home from NRH, which is all in keeping and maximising their rehab in NRH and preventing the return to acute hospital setting. 11% of patients, which was 3, were discharged from the acute to a residential setting while awaiting an NRH bed. So they were in the acute hospital setting. They had finished, well, they had kind of plateaued in terms of their rehab there. So they were discharged home and then transferred to the NRH. When they went back up to the NRH, we picked them up again because the team in the NRH would know that we're involved in them. Where am I? Sorry, 1% or sorry, 4%. It was one gentleman passed away while he was in the acute service, having been referred from NRH to an acute setting in Dublin. One patient was transferred to a transitional care unit. So again, rather than going back to the acute hospital setting, he went to a transitional care unit while his ADM and his capacity, his DMRO was being progressed. So I suppose this is really where we find that we're making a big difference as well, in that one patient only from 27 returned to their acute hospital setting. And hopefully by the time we speak again, it'll be 0. So then just a brief synopsis of the complex case pre and post when it came to the NRH. So as I said already, we had a gentleman when I started in November 2022 who was in one of our acute hospital settings. He was referred to us the 12th of December. His outstanding was home care package equipment and neurogenic bowel management. And he went home on the 21st of March 2023. So again, I just think that that really showed it was 99 days on CCMT to try and get this man home. So that's why we really need to recognise the fact that it's early discharge planning and engagement of all stakeholders to make sure that we get the patients home on time. When we started, the patients were referred to CCMT before they went to NRH. For an example, I'm just thinking of one man in particular. There was a lot of renovations. They were escalated via our council meeting on a Tuesday. Those commenced before the patient went to NRH. The adaptations, the patient transferred to NRH. MDTs were community services to raise the awareness. There was this gentleman had a loss of vision. So again, we were able to link him in with the Blind Council regarding the build, what was needed, what would make it easier. His home care package was submitted. Whilst he was in NRH, fortnightly meetings with NRH took place, again, with the community as well. We're involved there, continuous discussion, readaptation with the council. So on the weekly meeting, we kept annoying the council and saying, where are we now with the build? Will we be ready for discharge in time? He was able to be released from NRH for a weekend. And again, that was really beneficial because he came home for the weekend. We were able to put in a home care package. We were able to look at what other little minor changes may need to be made before he came home on a permanent basis. That worked really well. And he was discharged home on his PDD from NRH. Again, looking at patient flow, it's not just about our acute hospitals in our own region, it's about NRH. If we can increase the patient flow there and get the patients out, it means that another patient can avail of the bed up there. I think that's really important. I suppose the second part of my talk is really about the other outside of health and complex health needs, which we talk about a lot when we talk about NRH or physical care. We need to look at the other aspect of 10% of our caseload back in April of 2024. 10% of our total caseload that came in was included homeless patients. So we had 26 referrals for patients with housing issues due to complex care needs. So again, when we look at that, it's not just homelessness. We don't take referrals just for homelessness. It's those patients with the mental health issues, addiction issues, wheelchair users. Various personal circumstances may have changed or complex care needs. So again, this is where we come to our forum on the weekly basis with our representatives from the council and also from social inclusion to discuss the case, try and come up with a solution and see where we can progress it there. And I suppose Gabriel House there, just to be noted, is one of our step down units. And again, social inclusion and the addiction services have been really helpful in regards to progressing patients from the acute service to there as a step down. It's currently having renovations and works done. But again, I suppose it's just good to point out we've been able to use that service and it was really beneficial. I suppose in trying to progress these patients into a more secure setting of accommodation, you're preventing the constant, circle of movement from homelessness into the acutes to homelessness into the acutes. And it was, we had one lady who had been referred to us way back when we first started. And she was a 36-year-old lady and she was referred to us due to homelessness. And again, she had a lot of complex needs. She was a wheelchair user, drug and alcohol misuse. She'd been a victim of previous trauma and domestic abuse. And when she was ready for discharge, she was discharged to emergency accommodation. So the cycle kept happening all of the time, back to emergency accommodation, back into the acute services, back out, back in. So I suppose we looked at this and we looked at what we really needed. And again, with our colleagues in the council, social inclusion, primary care, we were able to come together. We worked very closely with Housing First. And we progressed this lady to becoming a tenant of Housing First. She has the support of the Housing First team. She has the support of the community network available to her. The public health nurse has been outstanding. And again, I suppose this lady had a lot of wounds so it was very difficult to manage her when she was transitioning all of the time from one site to another because she had no base. So it was really hard to manage her care. But because of the interventions, she now has all of that care available to her. She's part of a community. She has her own roof over her head. So when she has had to come back into into the acute service for IV antibiotics or for wound change or for debridement, she's no longer a delayed discharge. She's going back out into her own community. Social inclusion also supported us with regards to getting her some additional support funded into the community, which has made a huge difference to her life. So I think, it's about looking at all of the components that come into a patient's life, not just their health and well-being. Back in April, and I suppose following on from that and the engagement with the councils and the engagement with social inclusion, Mario Donovan would have led out on an interagency homeless collaboration conference back in April 2024. My understanding is this is one of its kind, where all of the interagencies came together to discuss and review the work being underdone to support homeless members of the community to improve their health, their well-being, increase their social outcome. This forum was also used to review the current strengths and weaknesses of the service that we provide, the challenges it provides. It was a great place to meet people actually and strengthen existing working relationships. And I suppose the feedback from it highlighted the need for the services and the importance of inter-collaboration agency working. So when we look at the enablers, I'm just looking at the interagency collaboration, including HAT meetings, homeless forums. There's established policies and procedures there. There's a point of admission for referral, very clearly defined roles, staff education, there's access to liaison psychiatry, addiction services, medical social worker, advocacy, homeless action team and local homeless forum. The NGO support is very positive. Agreed protocol with City Council and City Hospitals and the APS service in City. Again, when we look at the positives, unfortunately, we have to look at the negatives, and there are some, but I suppose what's happened from this is that there's now a working group on the interagency working group on the homeless group and trying to see how can we continue to improve the health needs. And as you know, was really clear on the day, health needs to know about housing and housing needs to know about health. So I think that's really important. And again, just to fly over the barriers, I suppose the lack of pharmacotherapy supports, language barriers. We live in a multicultural society, a need for a service directory, and that's being worked on at the moment. Emergency accommodation, and again, that would be one that would often come across as a barrier for our patients, because if you have somebody in a wheelchair, there's very limited homeless accommodation available to them. So that's really my bugbear. Escalation of complex cases and discharges, the lack of decision making. Again, the APS service is a Monday to Friday service. So what happens at the weekend when these homeless patients present into the ED on a Saturday? What happens? They're complex patients. What happens to them? And again, I suppose the lack of accommodation in various county areas. So to move on, and I'm nearly there, a review of our CCMT weekly complex integrated meeting works a dream. It's fantastic. Everybody comes. It lasts about 30 minutes. It's online. It's short, it's sharp. Everybody gets an action, literally, and that has to be completed by the next weekend. As I said, we have strong integration and communication with all of our stakeholders, particularly with the acute hospitals. I can't speak highly enough of the positivity from the acute hospitals in terms of discharge coordinators, bed managers. I think, we felt we were like the community and they were the acute. And now I could say I'm part of all of the teams and my own team is as well. So I think that's really important rather than the silo working. It is that flow amongst ourselves as well. And as somebody said to me once, you start together or, coming together is the beginning. Staying together is progress, but working together is successful. And I really think that is how it reflects for us with the acute hospital settings and with the community. Community public health nurses and network teams are really responsive once they get enough notice. Solution-focused integration with councils and homeless providers. Social inclusion's commitment to being solution-focused. I suppose when we look at the detox days against the scope to improve, 93 people, patients on the detox having 18,367 days on detox. If we decrease these days, we improve patient flow, we reduce the impact of hospital stays, we reduce the pressure on the acute hospital. And I suppose when we looked at what we would suggest, but I suppose, as my grandfather used to say, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. And if you can't walk, crawl, but keep going forward. And I think that's where we need to go with all of this. We do need more accessible accommodation. We do need more emergency accommodation for patients with complex needs, for patients with specialised equipment. We do need more step-down units for the under 65 to avoid unnecessary days in the acute hospital setting, to promote timely discharges from the hospital. We do need increased residential beds for young complex care needs, disability. Again, we have there is a significant need for those beds, and we are tending to be dependent on private providers. So I think we need to look at that. Increased rehabilitation services for the under 65. Again, analysis of patients requiring NRH. Obviously, there's a huge demand for NRH that's leading to a waiting list, that's leading to patients remaining in the acute hospital setting. So, how can we overcome that? Review and identification of the level of support and resources regarding infrastructure and staffing to meet the under 65 cohort in 24-hour care. When we look at applying for Fair Deal for the under 65, Fair Deal, which was designed for the over 65 patients, it's based on older persons requiring care. Younger adults have different needs, and I think their care needs and the calculations for their cost of care needs to incorporate an additional support care and treatment of younger adults. It needs to be more specific to the younger adult. And I would say that, we do need a placement forum specifically for younger adults rather than for the older persons. And I suppose finally, and we all know this, additional support, maximising the supports that we have in terms of community nursing and in regards to home support services. We heavily rely on private agencies for home care packages. So I think, it's about looking at what we have, how can we maximise it, and scoping out what we need. So, on that final note, just to share our contact details, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask post today, feel free to email myself or Sinead, and we'll be happy to come back to you. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you to Yvonne. And I think again, I think in particular Yvonne's presentation, just the complex needs that people have, the attention, the figuring out the problem, the working out the issue, the persistence, and they're the kind of things as Yvonne said, if you can't run, walk, if you can't walk, crawl, but you keep going forward, and that's the main thing. Just two very quick housekeeping things. We're going to have an awards ceremony in a few minutes. So just been asked to point out some of the award winners, if you haven't had your photograph taken yet, if you wanted to step out for a minute and vogue out there and get do your pose, that's absolutely fine. If not, there's plenty of time to do that afterwards. The second thing is you may have seen the networking matrix. Can you make sure that you're entered? And you'll be entered into a draw, and there will be a prize afterwards as well. So just to bear that in mind as well, that prize will be there. Now, I'm actually particularly excited to introduce the next speaker. I am an Offaly man, and Shirley Keys is the operations manager for Midlands Regional Hospital Tullamore. And I think it's fair to say she's going to tell you about how Tullamore is not a bad place. We punch above our weight. We might be a wild town, but the hospital ain't doing too bad. And she's going to tell you how she got there. Ladies and gentlemen, Shirley Keys.
Thank you very much. And first, I'd just like to start by being very grateful, really, to be here today to speak on behalf of the Midland Regional Hospital in Tullamore. I suppose I'll just give a quick introductory for those who might not know or be familiar with our hospital. I suppose just a bit of data around where we're located. We're in the Midlands. That's not working, sorry. We're in the Midlands. Yeah, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. So we're a Model 3 hospital. We are the largest hospital within the Midlands, and I suppose obviously we provide care to medical, surgical, critical care patients. But along with these patients, we also have regional specialities for our ENT services, our orthopaedic and trauma services, which cater to both paediatric and adult admissions. We are also the regional area for accepting patients for hematology, oncology, rheumatology, and nephrology. So I suppose the reason I'm saying this is we all are aware that these are high bed demanding services within the hospital. We predominantly serve Laois, Offaly, Westmeath and Longford, but in the last few years our catchment area has expanded. So I suppose before I get into where we are now, I just would like to give a snapshot of where we were, for example, back in up to and including early 2022. So my background is in emergency nursing. I was 17 years working within the emergency department, and 13 of these years I spent as a CNM2 shift leader within the emergency department. So like most sites, we were extremely challenged from an unscheduled care perspective. It was almost a daily occurrence that we had admitted patients within the emergency department. And on reflection, when I look back, it was the norm. It was the culture at the time. It's the hot topic in the media. In our site, there was nothing we could do. It was basic maths. There was too many patients, too little beds to put the patients in. We I suppose when enabled it and we facilitated it, we had a CNM2 for our admitted patients. It was just a given that if the patient was admitted and there was no inpatient bed, then they would remain within the emergency department, sometimes for days at a time. On my slides, there's a, oh, great, thank you. On the slide, I just picked one day and time there, the 23rd of February. We had 28 lodged patients, and 5 of these patients were greater than 24 hours. So as I said, when I would come on duty, when I worked in the emergency department, if you had less than 20 patients or less than 15 patients, you nearly had a sigh of relief. We have a little bit of wriggle room. We have a little bit of capacity to treat the tsunami of emergency department patients that were going to present on that day. And I suppose, look, we've all, and I'm sure you all know from working on the acute setting, it's not a safe place. It's safer to have the patients in a different area when they're admitted. You're trying to juggle both. You're trying to look after your admitted patients, give your quality care, specific, your MDT approach for your admitted patient, and then like a light switch, you have to treat your new patient who's presenting with a sepsis or a pediatric trauma. So it's very difficult to manage both in the same area. So I suppose when we look back again, why we felt we had the admitted patients in the emergency department, we had no clear identified surge area for these patients to be safely managed and cared for. We look back, we thought we had great pathways, but really they were ineffective. Our admission avoidance was practically non-existent. If a patient presented and they needed access to specialist diagnostics or a specialist consult, or even, as a previous speaker said, access to respite, the patient had to come in through the ED department and be admitted into the hospital in order to access this care. So I suppose looking back, we didn't know at the time. We thought we had everything in place. So I suppose it gives me great honour really to stand here now 2 years later and reflect on where we've come. So despite our ED attendances having increased by 14% and our presentations of over 75-year-olds has increased substantially to almost a 30% increase in the last 2 years. And despite this, we've managed to keep our conversion rates low, and we still strive to keep reducing our conversion rates. And I'm happy to say we've had no patient delayed within the emergency department waiting an inpatient or waiting a bed in the hospital. We're going on almost 2 years now with 0 patients on trolleys, admitted on our trolleys within the emergency department. So just the PET times, I suppose, when undoubtedly our PET times were going to improve because we could do our processes within the emergency department. I suppose the focus there and, our over 24-hour patients, we've had no admitted or non-admitted patients greater than 24 hours. Our over 75-year-old presentations, we still have a lot of work to do with our 6-hour PET times and our 9-hour PET times. But again, the data is fantastic to show us that we have this work to do. So I suppose the big question might be, or maybe not, but how did we get here? And I'm not going to lie, it's absolutely extremely hard work. Like you all know, every site is working very hard. It is relentless, especially the acute sites. It's a 24-hour service. It doesn't sleep. You could go to bed one night having X amount of inpatient beds, and you wake up the next morning and you wonder, did the train crash or something? So it's very, very challenging, and everybody is working extremely hard in every site, and it sometimes it can be draining because it's like Groundhog Day. You go in the next day and you're doing it all over again. I suppose in our hospital there was a big cultural change, as in we had to. It was a hospital-wide approach, and I don't know if I said it before, but when we had the admitted patients within the ED, it was nearly perceived, not intentionally, but it was ED's problem. It was ED's problem. What you saw in ED at any given time was incomprehensible, and only people who've worked in it would be in shock. And then the rest of the hospital was at a steadier pace. Not to say they were less busy, but just it didn't reflect what went on in ED. So I suppose we have a full hospital approach now to managing our unscheduled care. Collectively, we've decided we don't want any patients awaiting admission who are admitted being left within the emergency department. And I suppose in order to do that, we've had to change a few things. So after the national communication last year about our ED escalation, we had to redraft our ED escalation. And when we were doing so, we brought the full MDT on board. So our consultant surgeons, orthopedics, EM, senior management, patient flow, brought them together, sat around the table, looked at the trigger points from ED, and looked at what everybody's role is if these triggers are activated, if our plan has to be activated. And by bringing everyone together to agree on this, it kind of, I suppose, because like that, the teams would have been working in silo. This was then all of a sudden the consultant, orthopedic consultant in particular, I remember him saying, oh yeah, okay, that's no problem. I can come down to the department. If you let me know that we're reaching X amount or that there's a lot of a backlog or the department is coming a risk, due to the volume of patients. So he or she then on the day, whoever would have to present, would come and know immediately what's expected of them. They'll know their roles, their responsibilities. Senior decision makers on the floor and senior management team. This is our bread and butter. At the end of the day, leadership and governance, we have to be seen to be, management have to take accountability for what's happening within the hospital, within the four walls. It's up to the leaders and the managers to be present. So I suppose we overkill it. I'd say there's departments that go, I wish they'd go away, but we're there. We're in ED. We're in the patient flow hub a few times a day. We're conversing with not just admitting teams, the EM teams, patient flow, the site managers, but the heads of services, our cardiac diagnostics, what's happening on this particular day. So I suppose we are involved in a lot. There's a lot of conversations and communication around the patients. And, it's not all rosy in the garden. There does be challenging conversations. And, it's tough, but we have to be in the thick of it. I suppose you have to know your staff, and I don't want to sound patronising. And when I say build on a therapeutic relationship, and I know that's a bit waffly, but what we would do is we know all our staff, we know what's our services, we know where the shortfalls are or the risks lie, so that if we're asking a specific department, can you do X, Y, and Z? We know behind the scenes, well, this is what they can do. This is their risks that they're holding at the moment. This is their staff and etc. So it's a full approach to our team and who we know. And when our NCHDs start every 6 months, Katrina MacDonald, our general manager, or myself would do an introduction with the NCHDs. And within a month, we would hope to know the majority of the NCHDs. And most importantly, they would know us. They would see us. We meet them, that we're on the wards, we're on the corridors. We converse with the teams, they converse back to us. And you find that you gain so much information and they feel that they can escalate or say something to you. Now, we don't want to know every little tittle tattle, but it's important that they feel at any one time, anyone in our hospital can pick up the phone and could have phoned Katrina MacDonald, our general manager, day or night to escalate if there was a risk. Now, not to say that they did or needed to, because there's people in positions or site managers on duty, etc., but they knew they would be supported. And it's important that it's a two-way working relationship. I suppose more there on our slides, the availability of the ED cubicles. And I know Heather did a good presentation earlier from the ED, mapping your ED. Imagine how frustrating it is to be working in the emergency department and you want to bring a patient in to do an ECG or a simple talk in private. You have to go round, if it's anything like our emergency department was, round and round the department, try and find a cubicle, or the cubicle was free, you go to get the patient, you come back and it's been used again. Wholly frustrating for everybody involved, and like that you're traipsing the patient with you. So now, and the simple thing is, when we don't have our admitted patients within the emergency department, we have cubicle space. We're able to get the flow through the department quicker, and that in itself then allows for our turnaround times with the National Ambulance Service to be improved, etc. Development of pathways. No more than other sites have fantastic pathways. We have some in place. We have our RAT that's also operational, that's consultant led within the emergency department. I suppose our big thing was looking at our data and who was our clients, who was presenting to our hospital and why were they coming and what was the presenting complaints. As I mentioned in the previous slide, our increase of over 75-year-old presentations has gone up almost 30%. So we're on par from an attendance point of view with the larger Model 4 hospitals within our group. So when we focus on this, we decided we really needed to invest in the rapid access and frailty team at the front door. This is where the patients were coming in. Our EM consultants also, we have a rapid process for our over 75-year-old patients presenting, and then our frailty or our RAFT team, once they're positive for frailty, they see the patient and they can either support them safely through admission avoidance to return to our frailty hub in outpatients at whatever time. It can be time critical in a few days, or it can be pushed to a few weeks. Also, if the patient has to be admitted, our frailty team have seen the patient within the emergency department. We can identify them for our frailty beds, and they've already started on their journey. They've seen the consultant geriatrician, they've usually seen the physio, perhaps even the OT, and this in itself has started the patient's journey through the hospital and hopefully even help with reducing their length of stay. The PET and the KPI focus. Look, we share our data, our UEC data, our daily data is disseminated to our EM teams, our patient flow, etc. But it's not a matter of just flicking it on by an email. We look at, so if we had a weekend and there was particularly good PET times, it's the acknowledgement that there was really good work done. And if there was delays on a particular day, the next day when we see the delays in the PET time, we look at, what was our specialist teams, they were caught in theatre. Is it a rostering issue? So it's using that data, I suppose, to just help support what we need to change next. And I knew my colleague, my EM consultant colleague, Dr. Anna Moore, who's also the clinical lead within ED, she said a few weeks ago, when the ED is left to function as it's intended, the ED staff can focus on their work and their processes, and the gains will begin to multiply. And I just thought, wow, yeah, the ED is there for a reason. It's not there. And look, we all agree it's safer to have the patient in an identified area. As I said previously, we didn't have identified surge area, and we've had to identify it because where it's safer for the patient to be in an identified area, patient friendly, with designated staff minding the patients. So I suppose the two things, you can't talk about ED without talking about the hospital or patient flow. Otherwise, one won't work without the other. And throughout our hospital, our biggest investment was in our patient flow team, led by Sinead Boyd, our ADON in patient flow. I suppose I'm being biased here, but I just can't speak highly enough about our team. They are the most hardworking, on the ground with the patients. They know every patient in depth. They know their families, the CNMs, the clinicians, the community colleagues. They are on the floor 3 to 4 times a day on the wards, going meeting all the full MDT. And they are the driving force behind the patient flow, obviously within the hospital. They have done fantastic QIP initiatives in the hospital. One of these I just have on our graph here are the weekend discharges. And because now we can facilitate patient flow 7/7 basis, it's led to continuity in care. So they can identify the patients with the clinicians and know who would be suitable for criteria-led discharge. And that has really helped from our weekend discharge point of view, which is, we have to have that in order to be able to meet the demand for unscheduled care. Our patient flow team know that they can escalate to the senior management team if there's any issues at all, and vice versa. We know we can query with the patient flow team, because they know what's going on in the hospital. They know what's coming in, they know what's going out, they know who's in every bed. So they're just absolutely fantastic. I suppose really a few other initiatives there, which is happening on most sites, and our GP information evenings we found to be very beneficial, the shared learning and pathways, so that our GP colleagues are aware of, and especially with a hospital that's changing, it's difficult for them to know who's in positions where, what teams are there now, what supports and services can be offered. And I suppose, look at I think everybody, and it's a common question we get asked, does our scheduled care suffer as a result of our unscheduled care metrics and meeting the 8 a.m. trolley gar? I can answer that no, it doesn't. Yes, we have had to cancel cases at times, but they're case by case, and we try our utmost to allow and to facilitate scheduled care to go ahead. So our surge area was identified to be used within our day ward. And like that, there was, it was a difficult conversations to be had, because naturally our day services and our specialist services that occupy and that work within the day ward thought that their services were now going to be smothered by the patients who were admitted. But actually, it had quite the contrary effect. So we've fantastic CNMs, Deirdre, Evelyn, and a fantastic team within the day ward. And you'll see by our graph here that the productivity, they use the lean approach to their trolley turnovers, and their productivity has increased in the last 2 years. And this has resulted then in our day hospital and inpatient waiting list being reduced throughout the hospital. So it's to find the fine balance between the two. So I suppose what has helped us to change? Look, we have to always do the best by the patient at their point in their journey, and yeah, I'm not, everybody is here for the same reason. Sometimes, admission avoidance pathways, they're all great when they're used, or when their patient is able to be on that pathway. But sometimes the patients need to be admitted, and that has to be important to be recognised also. Fresh eyes. We, a few years ago, had a new general manager start with us, Katrina MacDonald. And I suppose Katrina's management style was to go to the people doing the job and ask them how they felt it could be done better or smarter. She empowered every discipline and heads of services and members of staff to look at their processes and see, can they come back with solution focused options to increase productivity or to do it better. And I suppose at that stage, we as a hospital we'd had enough. We were absolutely, as all the slides showed earlier, we were burnt out. We'd had enough, and we knew we needed to do better by our patients. We had changed how we did practices throughout COVID, and we changed quite rapidly, so we knew we could change again. And I suppose the big thing was the buy-in to change. It has to be a whole hospital approach, and it has to be, I suppose you'd feel when we are in escalation, or if we're particularly challenged from an unscheduled care perspective, you can actually nearly feel the adrenaline is nearly palpable within the hospital. And I don't mean from ED or even the admitting teams. Every department and service puts on their A game, from cardiac diagnostics to radiology service and our laboratory, etc. And it's important then, when we do de-escalate, that their hard work is recognised. Because sometimes, especially, for example, our lab, well, sometimes they get forgotten in all of this, but it's important that we feed back to them. The hospital was in escalation. It was, everybody performed really well. And thanks. And I suppose we have to, if we don't come together collaboratively, and if we don't, I suppose we've had a few sites come to visit us, and the common thing that everyone has recognised is that we have a collaborative approach to managing patient flow. We have a collaborative approach to providing the quality care to the patient. We all have the same objective and aim, and never thinking that we have it sorted. We absolutely don't have it sorted. We have there's sites with fantastic services and service developments and pathways that we'd only love to have within Tullamore. we don't have enough capacity to meet our demand. We don't. It's a struggle every single day. And I suppose there's plenty of improvements to be made. This likes of today, the information, the nuggets of information that we can all take back from different speakers and to try and apply within our own setting. And I suppose the 24/7 focus is just paramount. This is our patient flow team, Sinead, our aid on and patient flow. And I'm put up this slide because they are the heart of the hospital. We depend on them so much, and they ensure that our patients are getting the right service in the right place. And look, our metrics are great. Our waiting lists tell us a lot. Our pet times, they're all measurable. But at the end of the day, our judge and jury are the patients, their service users, and their families. They will decide if we're doing a good job or not. I've put up some feedback we've recently received on our national inpatient survey, and I suppose one of the bubbles there, I was treated with excellent care and support both in A&E and in the ward by every member of staff. And we all are here today because we all want to improve what we do for our patients or within our service. We want to make sure that we can go home and think, I've done the best for this patient. We will all be patients and probably have been patients and family members. We want to be confident with the care that we're providing. And I know the lady before me mentioned this, but it's really apt. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress, while working together is the definition of success. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Shirley, thank you very much. And it's wonderful, I suppose, to hear a success story and what was achieved in a relatively short space of time as well. And every success to Shirley and her team. And indeed, I think we're all picking up things, not only from what Shirley said, but other speakers, Yvonne and everyone in the early part of the day as well, in terms of things that we could look at and improve. Now, this is the glamour bit, okay? We have our inaugural Patient Flow Excellence Awards. Now, just as a couple of little moving parts, so just to explain what the awards are. So the awards are to recognise and celebrate staff who've completed projects that have improved inpatient flow, the kind of things that many of your colleagues were talking about this morning. There was an exceptional response to this awards call, and the submissions received demonstrated exemplar initiatives and innovation in patient flow across the regions. There are two categories today that we are presenting, the first prize winners and the second prize winners. Now, you're going to hear from the first prize winners in a moment. They're all going to come up and deliver a short presentation, just summarising what their own piece is. The second prize winners, if you look at your lanyard again, if you can click on that, you will see the story, you'll see the evidence and examples. Now, they'll be up here to get their awards as well. You just won't hear about them, but you'll get to read about them as well if you get a chance to. Now, the one thing I will just say to everyone at this point, and we say it every year at these awards, there is no reason why anyone sitting in this room could not be getting an award next year. So once you think about maybe if something inspired you, is there something you'd like to look at or change, you're going to probably, there's a very good chance you're going to hear someone talk about something, you're going to go, yeah, I could have done that. Or I thought of that, or when you put the bits together, that makes sense. So we'd like to call and I'm just going to name the speakers. We've Dr. Liz Kalali, we have Dr. Anne-Marie O'Brien, we've Ida O'Shaughnessy, Dr. Robert Briggs, Bree Crennan, and Helene Horsnell. So they're going to be our speakers in a minute. Just to explain that after they deliver their presentations, we will also call out the second prize winners. They will all come up as well. So if you are a second prize winner, make sure your room is available to get your award as well. We're going to try and run this as efficiently as possible. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes for each presentation as I call you up. On 7 minutes, a small, angry, bald man from Offaly will stand up in front of you and wave his arms. So that's just to explain that your time is almost up. But again, people will be around if people have any questions. Our presenters today as well, awarding the presentations, will be Grace Rothwell, the National Director of HSE Access and Integration, and Dr. Eve Stanley, the HSE Spark National NCHD Innovation Fellow, and they will be here to present the awards. So I would be delighted to introduce, first of all, Dr. Liz Kalali. Liz is a consultant geriatric and general physician, integrated care of the All Persons team, Dublin North Central Mater Hospital. Liz, you're very, very welcome.
So I'll try and stick to my 8 minutes, I promise. Try. So my name is Liz Callally, and whilst I am delivering this presentation today, I'm very clear that I'm really only one member of a large team of both clinicians and managers who've collaborated over a number of sites within DNC over a number of years, and we're very honoured to be able to describe our project to today. So we know that Ireland is experiencing a substantial growth in the older population. The number of people aged over 65 is expected to double in Ireland to almost 1.6 million by 2051. And in recently published comparative reports, we know that the situation where we work in Dublin North Central and Dublin North East is no different. More specifically, 8 of the CHNs in Dublin North East have a higher proportion of over 65-year-olds than the national average. And more specifically as well, 3 of the CHNs have a higher proportion of over 85-year-olds than the national average. And in addition, of those living in Ireland in extreme deprivation, 1/4 live in the Dublin North East area. So the aim of this project was to develop key pathways providing evidence-based, quality, equitable care across the acute and community interface in Dublin North Central. Given the change in demographic, reliance on bed-based care in acute hospitals is not only unsustainable, but more importantly, potentially harmful to the frail older patient. The harm associated with acute hospital admission is well documented for frail older persons. And we know that the National Clinical Programme for Integrated Care describes the clear evidence base and components of high quality integrated care with the aim of delivering an end-to-end clinical pathway that describes cohesive primary, secondary and acute care services for older people, thus supporting the sláinte care model of care of longitudinal care, supporting people in their community. Sorry, I've forgotten to pass on my slides. Apologies. That was our aim. So using the 10-step framework and focusing on steps 4 to 7 in particular, developing pathways, new ways of working in a multidisciplinary approach to provide service delivery with clear patient-centred focus, we mapped our current services and developed new pathways, which I'd like to describe here. So from the perspective of the patient, this is what the service map looked like before we had developed the new pathways. A patient goes to see their GP and is referred to the emergency department or outpatients for a specialist geriatric opinion. If referred to the emergency department and urgent specialist geriatric opinion needed, the patient would need an admission to the hospital to attain that. And in addition, the only access to rehabilitation was admission to the acute ward to wait for a rehab specialist review and transfer. On occasion, patients were transferred from the emergency department or the community, but without the new pathways, this transition of care was fraught with risk and inefficiencies. So this schematic outlines how the new pathways have transformed the flow from the patient's perspective. Now the frail older patient, once they attend the emergency department, benefits from a comprehensive geriatric assessment and specialist opinion from the frailty intervention team at the front door of the emergency department. The new pathways now open to the patient include a fit referral and transfer to a subacute specialist community rehab ward on the same day, and St Mary's in the Phoenix Park and Clontarf hospitals each have 16 beds dedicated and designated to the subacute pathway, i.e. 32 beds. Also new is a fit to discharge home pathway with safety netting and further specialist MDT input in their home with the CSTOP or Community Specialist Team for the Older Person. And thirdly is a transfer from the emergency department to the post-acute care unit for specialist medical, nursing and social work input for complex discharge planning, but without the rehabilitation element as this may not be needed. We've also set up a central referral in the outpatients and can take urgent GP referrals to the CSTOP team. So these pathways have benefited from clear real-time communication. In terms of we use a confidential silo app so the teams can confidentially communicate with each other by message. In addition, crucially, is a two-way flow when appropriate. So this real-time communication back to the fit team in the emergency department from the community is really important. Should a patient be transferred back in an ambulance, this happens by real-time communication. The fit team are alerted in the emergency department. So what does this mean for patient stories? So I suppose we were trying to think of typical patients that we would see that we really see benefit from this. So typical patients who might be those who present with explained falls and maybe simple fractures that don't need intervention. Often these patients have a complex medical background such as dementia, movement disorders, or complex social needs. And these patients would previously have been admitted to an acute hospital, but now can benefit from immediate transfer to a site more appropriately set up to meet their needs, such as the rehabilitation ward in the community near their home, or even direct discharge home with a home rehab program and full team MDT input, skilled to manage issues such as pain management, constipation, etc. And we have had some patients with explained delirium, especially those with exceptionally supportive families who've really benefited and been managed successfully at home. So we've also developed a pathway from patients' homes back into the subacute rehab wards when their needs cannot be met by the CSTOP service, diverting from the acute hospital completely, but yet still supporting the patient to access specialist gerontological input. A few patients came through this service during the first year, but this rose in the second year. And in the second year, patients from the community directly into the rehab beds were a proportion of 10% of all the admissions to the rehab beds. I suppose as expertise, professional relationships, and the inevitable demand from the changing demographic increase, we envisage these numbers to rise. I suppose what we're particularly proud of about our pathways is that the service is built to meet the patient's needs and fit the patient rather than the patient having to fit the service. So in terms of the numbers, we collected data on over 1,000 patient episodes who benefited from these pathways, i.e. the CSTOP home-based service, the rehabilitation, subacute rehabilitation off-site service, and the post-acute care complex discharge service over a 2-year period from July 22 to June 24. A total of 502 patients availed of the service in the first year, and this figure rose to 517 patients in the second year of establishment. Approximately 50%, you can see, were managed at home by the CSTOP service, and another 50% in designated subacute community rehabilitation ward at St Mary's and Clontarf hospitals. So the patients availing of our home-based CSTOP service were frail, with 76% having a CFS, a frailty score of 5 or over, indicating moderate to severe frailty. Most referrals to our home-based service came via the FIT team in the first year of establishment, and in the second year of establishment we noted that this changed a little, such that 55% of the referrals to the CSTOP came from either GPs or our consultant colleagues. The 3 pathways described resulted in an estimated 9,000 acute hospital bed days saved per annum, amounting to running a 25-bedded ward in a level 4 acute hospital. It amounts to significant cost savings, but we see the real win is to the patient who is offered the right care in the right place at the right time. And we are still evolving service, so we see as our performance should reflect our resources. To look and see if there was a sustained effect of appropriate hospital avoidance, we looked back at the 258 patients who availed of the home-based service in the first year and found the effect of managing these patients at home was sustained because only 8% required admission to the acute hospital within 30 days of discharge from the home-based team. We know that readmissions have both an economic and clinical cost. Sorry, I moved it on too fast. But we know that readmissions have an economical and clinical cost. However, this compares favourably to the national target of 11%. So the voice of the patient and family has been very clear all along in feedback forms and spontaneous compliments. And we'd like to mention, I suppose, what we think makes this successful. I would say relationships between professionals across sites, mainly partially helped by some of the clinicians working on all 3 or 4 sites, along with, as I mentioned, that real-time communication app in terms of forging those communications, but mainly those trust links in terms of trust across different platforms. We are grateful that this award will provide a stepping stone to future engagement with our primary care colleagues. And I'd like to acknowledge my co-contributors both to the project but also to the data and to the presentation. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much, Dr. Kalali. I'd like to introduce next a consultant cardiologist and general physician in Mallow General Hospital, presenting on the new care pathway to enable ambulance transfer patients to Model 2 Hospital Medical Assessment Unit, Dr. Anne-Marie O'Flynn.
Good afternoon all, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present our project, which is entitled New Care Pathway to Enable Ambulances Transfer Patients to a Model 2 Hospital Medical Assessment Unit. This was a collaborative project between ourselves and Mallow General Hospital and the National Ambulance Service. So by means of background, I don't need to tell anybody here that the acute medicine programme described the 4 models of hospital that we're now already really familiar with back in 2010. At that stage, Mallow General Hospital was designated a Model 2 centre, so we don't have an ICU and we do not have anaesthetic backup on site. Our emergency department was replaced at that time with an urgent care centre, including an MAU and a local injuries unit. And bypass protocols were in place for 999 and 112 calls, so these patients were automatically transferred to the nearest emergency department. I don't need to tell anybody here about the Sláinte Care Report in 2017, which stated a key goal of right care, right place, right time. But it was noted that some patients who were bypassing Mallow General Hospital after the emergency department was no longer there could well have been cared for by ourselves, Mallow General Hospital. So in collaboration with colleagues in the National Ambulance Service, we developed a pathway whereby certain low-risk patients for whom a 999 or 112 call had been made could be brought directly to the MAU of Mallow General Hospital rather than the nearest emergency department. And we implemented this pathway in September 2022 for 3 months as a pilot to assess the feasibility, safety and effectiveness. So we implemented the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle for quality improvement when undertaking this project. And a key part of the planning involved having a project team and considering facilitators and barriers. And a key facilitator was felt to be communication. Our colleagues in the ambulance service developed a free phone number for ambulance crews to be able to contact the consultant on call directly who was covering the medical assessment unit. And another key, I suppose, component was education of the crews at the time as to how this pathway was going to work. So I'll come on to the doing of the project. We had strict inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the inclusion criteria included patients who'd be recently admitted and discharged from Mallow General Hospital, patients who had a ceiling of care established and they were not for escalation to ICU, and low-risk medical patients with stable vital signs. The exclusion criteria involved patients who would require a higher level of care, so ITU support, patients with ST elevation MI, stroke, or those likely to require advanced respiratory support, or those requiring specialties who weren't available on site in Mallow General Hospital. This is an outline of the pathway. So there would be a 999 or 112 call. The paramedic would attend and assess the patient, consider the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then use that free phone number to discuss directly with the medical consultant on call in Mallow General Hospital using the HSE handover framework. Following discussion, the patient was either accepted or was advised to transfer the patient to the nearest emergency department. So as part of the study, we collected clinical details of the patients who weren't accepted and why. We carried out descriptive statistics of patients accepted, and we estimated the amount of ambulance time saved for each patient accepted to the medical assessment unit at approximately 150 minutes. And this was based on the return journey time from MGH to CUH, as well as the average turnaround time in CUH at the time of the study, and that turnaround time has since improved significantly. So the results, a total of 39 patients were discussed, and 29 of these were accepted to the medical assessment unit for review. The mean age of those reviewed was 73 years. This is an outline of the 10 patients who weren't accepted, and the majority needed specialty services that weren't available on site in Mallow General Hospital, such as trauma, ENT, urology, and surgery. Of the patients who were accepted, that number being 29, 1 declined transfer, 7 were discharged on the same day following review. There were 20 admissions to Mallow General Hospital, and 1 patient required transfer to Cork University Hospital on the same day. Of the 20 admissions, 17 were discharged to home, 2 required discharge to long-term care, and 1 patient required escalation to CUH at day 3 following an acute deterioration. Of the 20 patients admitted to Mallow General Hospital, the mean length of stay was 8 days. And I suppose, not surprisingly, 7 of the 20 patients admitted to hospital presented due to frailty and falls. And again, not surprisingly, the mean age of these patients was older at 84 years of age, and their mean length of stay was longer at 12 days. In addition, we estimated approximately 4,350 minutes or 72.5 hours of ambulance time was returned to the system over the 3-month period of this pilot. So while the overall number of patients were low, there was also an indirect benefit for patients who may have required an ambulance in the North Cork area while this pilot study was being undertaken. The challenges. So calls were received outside of the pathway operational hours, and there was some discrepancies in how these were managed. The initial inclusion criteria caused some confusion, and these were reviewed at the 3-month review meeting. There was some external pressure applied to accept patients that did not fulfill the inclusion criteria. 1 patient accepted required same-day transfer to a Model 4 centre. However, I would say this patient was able to transfer directly to the stroke service on the day and was also able to have their CT brain carried out prior to transfer. The pathway wasn't extended to weekends due to resource issues, and this was mainly due to lack of access to diagnostics at weekends and fewer doctors being on site at weekends. We're in a slightly worse situation now than we were then, because we've since had issues with our laboratory staffing at weekends, so resourcing remains an ongoing challenge. I'll conclude by saying that this pathway safely facilitated the assessment and treatment of patients in a setting close to their home, and it also had the indirect benefit of maintaining ambulance cover in the North Cork area. We published our pathway in the Irish Journal of Medical Science this year for anybody who wants to read more about it. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues both in Mallow General Hospital and in the National Ambulance Service, without whom this project would not have been possible. And I'll conclude by saying Gur Míle Mágaibh.
And can I just say, Dr. Anne-Marie O'Flynn, you can add another 3 minutes to your score there as well. Very well done. We're ahead of schedule there. Our next presenter will present on age-friendly healthcare in the Midwest, the Geriatric Emergency Medicine Unit, and I'm delighted to welcome the clinical specialist, occupational therapist at University Hospital Limerick, Ida O'Shaughnessy. Ida.
Thanks very much, Barry. And my colleague, Dr. Katrina Malarkey, and I are delighted to be recipients of this Patient Flow Excellence Awards. And I'm going to speak to you about our experience of age-friendly healthcare in the Midwest and the development of the Geriatric Emergency Medicine Unit there. So by way of background, I thought I'd open with a quotation from our Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Colm Henry, whom I know we'll hear from later, when he stated last year that older persons are now the purpose of healthcare and not the problem. And as clinicians, researchers, or policymakers, it's imperative that we challenge any ageist attitudes or discourses that exist with respect to older adults accessing healthcare, not least in the context of emergency department crowding. We all know, we've heard about it throughout the day, that older adults are really very clinically heterogeneous. And whilst frailty is not synonymous with older age, older adults living with frailty are at increased risk of experiencing multiple adverse outcomes, and their needs are just not suited to protocol-driven pathways that traditionally exist in the ED. Therefore, innovations in models of care and reconfiguration of services are required to meet their multifactorial needs. So from a local context, HSE Midwest, comprising Limerick, Clare and North Tipperary, serves a population of just under 500,000, with University Hospital Limerick as our Model 4 site. The Geriatric Emergency Medicine Unit opened on a phased basis last year and now provides 24/7 access to older adults seeking emergency care. The unit is governed by emergency medicine consultants, enabling older adults stream direct from triage to the unit provided they meet the inclusion criteria. It's staffed by emergency nursing and NCHDs and health and social care professional teams of occupational therapy, physiotherapy, medical social work and dietetics who have extended their working hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday. What the GEM unit really offers is a timely team-based assessment in an environment that is attuned to their needs. And our interdisciplinary assessment is underpinned by holistic care planning and shared decision making, which is very much guided by the older adults' priorities, preferences and goals of care. The unit itself was retrofitted, so the design for the refurb was informed by the dementia-friendly hospitals from a universal design approach. And whilst the unit is on the same level as the emergency department, it's not co-located. These images very clearly illustrate, I suppose, the universal design of the unit. Each cubicle has orthopaedic chair, encouraging that fit-to-sit movement, date and time clocks for orientation, accessible toileting facilities, and then that colour contrast which spatially defines doorways, etc. Our methodology from the development of geriatric emergency medicine has spanned 6 years in UHL, and it's been evidence-based, data-driven, and it's involved multiple stakeholders. It first began in 2018 as part of a HRB-funded study led by Professor Galvin in the University of Limerick, with support from the EMP and a number of national collaborators. And an RCT, or randomised controlled trial, that was conducted as part of that found compelling evidence that a dedicated health and social care professionals team in the emergency department can reduce the length of stay and incidence of admission amongst older adults, as well as improving satisfaction and overall cost effectiveness. And this evidence really was used, I suppose, in conjunction with the PMIU in 2022 to scale up the service to where we are today. Currently, our methodology is guided by ongoing quality improvement. And what we use is the Institute of Healthcare Improvement 4M's clinical framework. For anyone that doesn't know, the 4M's framework reorganises healthcare around the needs, preferences and of older adults, rather than basing it solely on illness or injury. And it really embraces the belief that what matters most, medication, mind and mobility, should form part of every assessment and transition of care. So moving on, I'm going to present some information on our results, and all data that I present pertain to data analysed and captured by the Health and Social Care Professionals team. So 1,310 patients were included in Q1 to 3 of this year, with a mean age of 82.6 years. And 51% were self-referrers to the ED and 54% were conveyed via ambulance. Frailty assessment is operationalised using the clinical frailty scale that Liz spoke to there earlier. And just to note that 62% of our cohort were living with mild to moderate frailty, indicating a requirement for assistance with at least one activity of daily living. One of our key outcomes of interest is instance of discharge following the GEM unit attendance, and 54.7% of older adults were discharged to their place of residence. For those that were admitted to hospital, 34% were admitted to UHL, our Model 4 site, with the remaining 11.3 transferred or admitted to our Model 2 facilities direct from the ED, those being St John's Hospital, Ennis Hospital, Nina General Hospital. A key metric that we monitor really very closely is our incidence of 30-day unscheduled ED revisit, and that currently sits at 13.4%, and that has trended down from 19% in 2019. In terms of patient experience times, these are routinely collected metrics or data. The PET time for a total cohort was 18.2% or hours. And if you analyse then based on admission versus discharge, you will see that those that were discharged home spent just under 19 hours less in the emergency department than those that were admitted. And this can largely be explained by, I suppose, wait time to access an inpatient bed once the decision to admit has been made, with 1 in 3 older adults spending over 24 hours on a trolley. Very briefly, our focus is on integration at the primary secondary in our interface, and we've heard so much about that this morning and that left shift in reform and activity. And this really is achieved by exploring alternatives to hospital admission with older adults and those important to them. And this is only made possible by the timely access and follow up by our colleagues across HSE Midwest. And you'll see here the whole list of services that we routinely access, with our CSTOPs being the primary referral pathway that we generate. In addition to all of the process-driven measures, we've invested quite heavily, led by Dr. Malarkey, in, I suppose, better understanding and enhancing patient comfort. And this has led to us progressing a QIP, the patient comfort cart. And one of the primary aims of it is to better meet the needs of older adults that present with cognitive, communicative, or sensory impairments to the unit. So commonly included items in our comfort cart are communication supports, so like magnifying glasses, hearing amplifiers, personal care items, denture boxes, toothpaste, non-slip socks, eye masks, etc., and other recreational items such as newspapers, crosswords, etc. Finally, last slide, given that we're at a patient flow conference, it would be remiss of me not to, I suppose, acknowledge the challenges that we have with respect to patient flow once that decision to admit has been made. And one solution to this is the development of an acute geriatric unit, which is one organisational form of comprehensive geriatric assessment that Prof. Redhead spoke to. And this configuration of this unit is supported by really compelling international evidence. I suppose I said that our current location is not adjacent to the ED, and this brings about its own challenges as we share resources for CT imaging, etc. But this will be addressed in the HSE Midwest future capital expansion plan, which really recognises the need for co-location alongside the emergency department. And finally, service development is always at the core of everything that we do. It's important that the 9-bay assessment that we have in the GEM unit, I suppose that ethos of age-friendly healthcare is spread across the emergency department floor. And that's something, I suppose, that is ongoing in terms of quality improvement at University Hospital Limerick. Thank you.
And congratulations, Seeda and her team on that success and the progress made there as well. I'd next like to introduce Consultant Geriatrician, St. James's Hospital, Dr. Robert Briggs.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to, thanks for the opportunity to present on behalf of our team in the Fault and Syncope Unit in St. James's on our intervention, which is entitled Front Door Comprehensive Geriatric Assessment for Older Patients with Falls. So the patient flow problem we identified was how falls are managed in the acute hospital. 20% of older people who present to the hospital come with falls or faints or an injury related to a fall, and it's the most frequent reason why they attend the acute hospital. Almost 60% of over 70s who present with a fall are admitted to hospital. In St. James's, looking at our average length of stays, when somebody's admitted with a fall, it's quite long, usually at least over 10 days. And falls represent the highest condition or the highest reason why hospital bed days are used. Unfortunately, we probably don't often do a great job when patients are admitted with falls. Almost half of patients who come in with a fall are discharged home without a diagnosis for why they presented in the first place. So our solution was a new clinical pathway entitled the Emergency Department Falls and Syncope Service, or ED-FAST for short. And essentially what this would do is provide front door assessment for all patients who present with falls, with a particular focus on older people. Our aim was to improve care and give these patients an earlier diagnosis for their falls, and we felt that not following on from that we would reduce unnecessary admissions. We do that by directing their care towards, I suppose, appropriate ambulatory care pathways we already had in place in our falls unit in St. James's. We also hope that if, sometimes patients do need to come in, and if they did need to come in, that we'd be able to reduce the length of stay once they were admitted with a fall or a faint or an injury. So our service has three real pillars. We have our ED front door service, where we see people directly in the emergency department to obviate the need for them to be seen by the emergency department medical team. We provided rapid access clinics for the emergency department for patients that presented out of hours. And we put in place a same-day review service for patients who were admitted to hospital. And we saw patients with falls, dizziness and faints. And it was a very multidisciplinary approach, and our team comprises of consultant geriatricians, SPRs in geriatric medicine, clinical nurse specialists with access to physiotherapy and occupational therapy as well. How the ED fast works was that when a patient presents to triage, the nurse will contact us and they'll be reviewed by our clinical nurse specialist. So they don't need to be seen by the ED team, and they're seen straight away by us. They're put on our ED FAZU pathway and then essentially are under our care, so the emergency department don't necessarily have to worry about them anymore. And then we plan, I suppose, whether we would bring them to our falls unit, whether we would discharge them directly from the ED with follow-up or admit if needed. And I suppose the core thing is that the assessment is age attuned. Most of these people are older people, that we give them a diagnosis, which was missing previously. It's really important that we review their medications and admission avoidance where feasible. As I said, sometimes older people are generally the target for admission avoidance, but the standard of care that needs to be provided to achieve that should be similar to what they would have got if they came into hospital. So this just demonstrates the impact of the service and looks at the situation before we started compared to after, and just shows the reduction in admissions or conversion rates for patients who presented with a fall. Overall, there was a significant reduction of about 20% in admissions related to falls. And this data is for the whole 24-hour period rather than just for the 9 to 5, 8 to 6 time that the service was operating. Most patients that we actually see during the day in the emergency department, we can get home. You'd expect maybe if you're discharging more patients from the emergency department that the length of stay of those who admitted would be relatively higher, but we found that patients that were admitted actually stayed for a shorter amount of time in hospital. So on average, patients after we started the service only stayed in hospital for 3 days fewer than before we started the service. And when we look at the combination of the reduction in length of stay and the higher discharge rate from the emergency department, you can see that bed days used related to falls in St. James's Hospital has halved since we started the service. And falls now aren't actually the most common reason why attributable to bed day use in the hospital. When we take into account the age of patients that present, how unwell they are when they present and what they present with, looking at our service, it essentially reduced the likelihood of admission by about 33% for patients presenting to the emergency department with a fall. And again, I suppose as an important marker of quality of care, you don't want to see that leads to increased readmissions. So we examined that also at 3 months and found that actually it was the opposite, that if patients were seen by our service, the likelihood of representation to the hospital was also reduced by about 30%. And we think that's from the kind of, I suppose, comprehensive geriatric care that these patients receive when they present to the hospital. It's important also that these interventions, I suppose, are cost effective. An acute hospital bed day cost in Ireland is around €850. Over 12 months, our service led to a notional bed day saving of around 9,000 beds, which is the equivalent to a full ward now looked after in ambulatory care rather than in the acute hospital of patients who've had a fall. This doesn't include the savings that we've kind of, I suppose, led to in terms of avoiding the need for unnecessary CTs or EEGs or echoes. To run the service costs around €500,000, so it's significantly cost effective. I suppose just to finish with a case study demonstrating, I suppose, why we think the service is worthwhile. So this is an 84-year-old lady who we saw relatively early in the time we started the service. She was a lady who was admitted with a fall due to a loss of consciousness or syncope. She was initially seen and referred for admission under the medical team, and she spent 16 hours in total in the emergency department. She was in hospital for 5 days under the medical team. She had an echo and telemetry and a CT brain, and she was discharged home, but her episodes kept happening. They remained unexplained, and she was subsequently readmitted or represented with an episode. We saw her directly in the emergency department. We gave her a working diagnosis and put a management plan in place, and she was discharged from the ED within 2 hours. We saw her again in a rapid access clinic 3 days later for testing and confirmed her diagnosis of orthostatic hypotension, and then she was linked with our day hospital and hasn't re-presented since. So I suppose the take-home messages from our project is that embedding an age-attuned specialist fall service in the ED can reduce admissions by 30%. Patients spend 3 days less in hospital after they were admitted, and they were 30% less likely to be readmitted at 3 months. And it highlights the significant benefits of embedding a dedicated age-attuned service at the front door of the hospital for patients with falls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Briggs. And I think it was interesting as well. You were able to bring in the sense of the savings as well when it comes to not only the resources, but the money as well. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is the Assistant Director of Nursing Patient Flow, St. Luke's General Hospital, Carlow Kilkenny, Breed Crennan.
Thank you for having me. On behalf of St. Luke's Hospital, I'm delighted to accept this reward. So St. Luke's Hospital is a Model 3 hospital, and it caters for a population of 165,616, and that's according to the 2022 census. So I think it's probably gone up since then. Our presentations to the acute floor year to date is actually at 40,000, with approximately 6,000 over 75 years of age. So our aim of this project was to improve patient flow in the emergency department. So that's our emergency department team. As you can see, they're all smiling. There's no burnout, not because we're down on the floor, we're just a little bit short. So the background, so providing high quality care to the undifferentiated, undiagnosed patient is of the utmost importance to the patients that access our emergency department and also the staff that work in it. A lot of work had been done in the last 2 years with the visual hospital. However, and that work showed a decrease of 56% in the trolley car returns. However, and concerning, we still weren't compliant with our 6 to 9 hour patient experience times. Our ED-wide communication board was manually updated. The data was easily deleted, and it was CNM2 dependent. And a rapid improvement event in the past had highlighted the need for additional MDT huddles throughout the 24 hours. So the aim of the project was to improve patient experience times in the emergency department, to reduce the number of patients returned on trolley car. We wanted a further reduction, improve communications within the multidisciplinary team, and introduce a digital solution support system to ensure that staff are working with real-time data. So data analysis. So in June 2024, the patient experience time was only 66%, and our target is 75%. The IPMS system, while it's really, really good, however, it's not very visual. So at a glance, you can't see the number of hours that patients are spending in the emergency department. The MDT huddle at 9 a.m. again was good, guided by the emergency medicine programme, but we didn't present the patient experience times, and we didn't present the number of attendances that had accessed our emergency department in the previous day. So how can you change what people don't know? There was a very, very good relationship between the CNM2 shift leaders and the bed management, but there was no formalised bed management rounds, in that the bed manager visited the department first thing in the morning, and then the CNM2 updated them throughout the day. However, there needed to be a presence at certain times throughout the day of a representative from Patient Flow, and that was the aide on Patient Flow. So the solution was to get a multidisciplinary team together to work on improving the patient experience times. So we had representatives from our ED consultants, our nursing team in the emergency department, our patient flow, bed management, and again, we had great guidance from our unscheduled care lead, Denise Rosberg, and of course, our business manager, Marion Flynn. We then looked at the timestamp huddles. So we wanted to change the 9 o'clock huddle and introduce a further 3 huddles throughout the day. We wanted to introduce a point of care data collection sheet, and we needed to introduce a digital system. So I'm going back to the timestamp huddle. So we restructured the 9 a.m. huddle, and that was really, really important because we needed to present the data to the emergency team. So that 9 a.m. huddle has representatives from all the ED consultants. So all the ED consultants, when they're on duty, they go to the 9 o'clock huddle. All the nursing team is present. Members from the geriatric medicine assessment team is present. We have our AMPs, we have members from clerical, we have our healthcare assistants, and of course we have our aid on over the acute floor and patient flow. The CNM2 then runs that huddle in the morning, and the situation as it is at that time, the ED situation, the number of attendances that are there, who are really sick patients, patients waiting triage, what are our numbers, have we any ambulance waiting for handover, patients in the resuscitation, and then staff shortages, and all that's discussed. Then we present the data. So we present the previous day's attendance, we present the patient experience time, and you can really see the engagement with the team. Every day there's a look out, wonder what our patient experience times was yesterday. If there was a blip, why was there a blip? Sometimes they know by my face. You know, I'm either coming in and I'm laughing or, God, what happened yesterday? And it's great when we have the staff that are on today that were on yesterday because they're able to give us ideas. We look at issues and trends as well, and that's addressed. And our ED consultants then give an overview if there's some new information that needs to be given. So take, for instance, yesterday they were talking about the new trauma documentation. It could be sepsis, it could be something to do with the PED, and anything that, so there's education there. And then also the System View IT digital system. So that's fed by the IPMS. And while it's a great system, it gives you a very visual photo really of the emergency department at that time, the number of patients that are in it, are we getting near breaches? It changes, the colour changes. So great education was done to the CNM2s and our consultants in the emergency department because they really monitor that very, very closely. And I've yet to go to the emergency department now without seeing an ED consultant on the floor. They're driving it. They're really working towards it with our CNM2s. So that's really, really good. So the results have shown that we have a continuous improvement compliance in our key performance indicators. There's an awareness now about our key performance indicators. There's good improvement between the teamwork and communication, and there's familiarity with our digital solution. And then as well as that, there's constant review and addressing of issues and trends. So just for example, 2 weeks ago we had whereby we had patients coming back for ultrasounds. They were discharged the previous day, they were coming back in, but they're waiting a period of time in the emergency department. Rang radiology, why is this patient waiting? They couldn't see the order on the system. Why? Because it had populated into an outpatient system. Straight away, there's something that we need to deal with it. Got in touch with the consultants, got in touch with the radiology manager. The next day, there was a 10-minute education session, and that was it. That problem is now solved, and we can move on from it. The other could be other issues is accessing the beds on the wards. The bed will be given by the bed manager, but what's the delay? And, you know, is it portering? Is it why hasn't the patient left? Is it an ambulance delay? Addressing those issues. So, fortunately, we went from 66% of patients that were seen and cleared within 6 hours to 81% in September, and hopefully that's still rising for October. Patients cleared within 9 hours of non-admitted patients went from 90% to 97%. And then for the admitted patients, we've gone from 66% to 74% within 6 hours. Still a bit of work to be done there. And then 9 hours, we're clearing 94%. Just getting the final card. So the aim of this project was to improve patient experience times in the emergency department by addressing issues that are causing delays in managing the patient's journey. And this was driven by a culture of continuous improvement, collaboration, and sharing what works well. Dr. Michael Connor, on the very first patient flow information session, he said patient flow was everybody's responsibility. And without the commitment of all the emergency team, the patient flow, the bed management, and St. Luke's Hospital, we wouldn't have achieved the results that we have. It's a work in progress and it will continue to change as the need arises. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Breed and her happy gang. I think that was a nice photo. Can I just say we have our last presenter coming up in a moment, but can I just ask the our second prize award winners, we will be calling you up to accept your awards afterwards. Here will be awarded here. So just stay in the room when our next speaker is finished. So I'm delighted to welcome our final presenter today, who is the Unscheduled Care Manager, HSE West, Northwest Region, Helene Horsnell.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here and I'm delighted to receive this award for the West Northwest region on behalf of all the multidisciplinary teams that have participated in this project. This has been a very large-scale project. It's covered the 6 hospitals within the region. We've 1 Model 4, 4 Model 3s, and 1 Model 2 hospital. To date, we have over 60 plus wards that have model wards up, established, and are in sustainability phase. So model wards and what it is. So the concept of model wards is the multidisciplinary team working together towards improvement in a patient-centred approach. And it is about a continuous improvement. So the methodology that we used was the change acceleration process. This was obviously fundamentally the hospitals. I was leading out in the project, but it was open collaboration and team working. It was stakeholders analysis that was carried out in each one of the hospitals. We had identified team leads and co-leads from the very onset to ensure that there was ownership so that we could actually hold on to sustainability of the project. So the problem was, and we've heard a lot of it today, I'm not telling you anything new, patient care and discharge planning was not integrated, leading to poor planning and gaps in communication among the interdisciplinary team. The patient is at the centre and cohort of all and everything what we do, but our multidisciplinary teams, the care wasn't integrated. We had huge gaps in communication. There was poor planning and we were working in silos. So what did we do? As I said, kind of like there was a number of changes, and when you talk about model wards, it relates to ward processes to deliver safe patient care and timely care. So each one of our hospitals now have a standardised whiteboard. And it's been really good, I suppose, kind of like there's been adaptations. This project started in 2019. It paused over COVID and then took back up to place then in 2001. And obviously it was, at a time, it was 2 to 3 wards at a time. So now we have, obviously these are the standardised whiteboards in our hospitals. There's some modifications and changes in each of the hospitals, but fundamentally they have a start and end plan for every patient. They have patient stated magnets and the traffic light system, which you'd all be familiar with. They have red to green as a new addition to this year. Obviously there's a real focus in ensuring that every day is a value-added day for our patients. And while some of the hospitals were implementing safer, the visuality of having it on the board and actually capturing if they're having a red day and ensuring that how could we turn that green really kind of has made an impact by actually having the visual strips on the whiteboards. Communication was key, and this is kind of from top down and bottom up. All disciplines now, for any updates on the information, it's all done by the whiteboard, and that's IPC, the operational add-ons, everything's done, the updates is done by the whiteboard, all rounds are completed. We now have developed a standard operation procedure policy for each one of our whiteboards with clear roles, responsibilities. So we've developed, obviously with the model wards, it's the ward drumbeat, and that's ensuring that kind of at every point in time during the day that there's something happening that's key to progress patient flow. And that's the kick-off in the morning and it's right through to the night. And that's over kind of like 7 days a week. Standardised processes, you'll see here on the right-hand side, we have HSE whiteboard rounds. They take place, in some hospitals, they take place daily. In other hospitals, they can take place once, twice weekly. Within the West Northwest region, and maybe some of other hospitals have actually used this since, but we have our own unique HSP referral triangle system to monitor this. Also, what was introduced is safety huddles, and we heard all about the importance about communication. And I suppose it's really important, whilst the patient comes in and they're sick, but it is the earlier we can start our discharge planning, and we talked about that today and the importance of it, then actually we can turn our patients around and get them where they want to be, which is at home with their loved ones. We have board rounds from our clinicians and our cohort boards. We have whiteboard audits, and that's a new addition as well, which you can see at the very end, and that's each of the hospitals just for sustainability. And they'll all know that when I go on work on the sites, and I'll have a key agenda of work carried out for the day, but I'll always make time to go up to the wards to see how they're performing and if they're sustaining the work that they tell me they are. So we have model ward working groups in our hospitals, and this is kind of from all disciplines. They're monthly meetings. It's a shared learning and metric updates. As I said, the whiteboard audit now is part of sustainability. An additionality onto this, the end of last year, obviously the requirement nationally regarding the greater than 14-day length of stay focus. We've introduced these integrated rounds in all our hospitals where community obviously come in and everything is done at the whiteboard. Our regional data analyst has actually developed a unique length of stay standardised tool that actually that's developed now, and it's in place across all our hospitals. And this focuses as well on the start and end plan for our patients, ensuring there's a clear plan, and it also asks the patients having a red or a green day. And we can actually zone in and focus in on patients who are having multiple red days and then mitigating that. So Grace will like this more than recently as well. Since April, we've started deep dive patient flow rounds, and that's based on the national appropriate evaluation bed utilisation tool, and it's 1 day a week that every patient in the bed. As I say, one hospital in Portiuncula does this every day, but the other hospitals, the busier hospitals, it's done once a week. We have a report, a formalised BI report for Galway, and each of the other hospitals actually do a Word document report, and primarily is focusing on actually patients who are having the cohort of patients, first of all looking at the greater than 75-year-olds, but equally looking at the number of patients that are having red days and why, to mitigate, to reduce that with follow-up actions and closeouts. And we trend the data, we trend the teams, the specialties, we trend the wards, just to see if there's further work that we can do to zone in it. We have more recently developed an escalation process, because we talk about red days, and obviously we want to ensure that there's a value-added day for all our patients every day. So any patient that has a greater than 3-day length of red days, they shouldn't really have, but just to have the caveat, we have actually got an escalation process, and that's monitored as well. So some of the impacts to date, this data is the PMIU, and it's from January to September last year in comparison to this year. So to date, a lot with this piece of work and with other work, we've had a 33% reduction in the 24-hour PETs for all our patients. For the greater than 75-year-old, greater than 24-hour PETs, there's been a 40% reduction. This is across the region. And to date, there's been a 20% reduction in the 8 AM trolley gar. So the impacts. The project demonstrates that implementing processes that facilitate structured communication, improves integrated patient care and discharge planning. And really the key element around model wards is actually having that daily operational drumbeat. Ward processes are structured, clear roles and responsibilities, improved communication with our multidisciplinary team, improved team collaboration, PDD compliance using the whiteboard, the length of stay reduction. So we've just recently carried out this project in Roscommon, and their length of stay went from 15, the average medical length of stay went from 15 down to 9.6. Increased bed occupancy. We've had a 7% reduction the same time period, as I said, from last year to this year in our surge capacity. Reduction in our greater than 14-day length of stay targets. Each of our hospitals have got targets set. Red to green playing a significant role in the day-to-day operations of patient flow. Model wards is on the nursing induction programs. It's on the nursing curriculum in NUIG. It's progressing in ATU in Castlebar, in Roscommon and St Angela's in Sligo. Practice development is heavily involved in this piece of work. And we now have just had our fourth year students starting placement with the patient flow teams. It's really important that from the very onset that we get our students, the nurses of the future in early, getting them in to understand, and the feedback to date has been extremely positive. So that started in Sligo and it's progressing in Mayo. And my last, some other pieces, I'll be very quick now. Save the best to last. No, not. And this is just some other impacts around, because when you get a team who are really creative and who really want to make a difference for the patients that we serve, we have standardised and welcome to the ward whiteboard information boards for our patients and discharge information boards, model board board there for all staff that's coming on stream for all the multitude teams, so they're aware that they're joining, and that's in Mayo, and information discharge and information leaflets for our patients. This is the team. It's only some of them. They're massive. They're doing all the work. I'm leading and working with them. But I really like to commend this piece of work to date to all the MDTs across the West North West region. Thank you.
Okay, Helene, thank you very much. I think you were dead right to put me in my place there for a minute, okay? Absolutely. I also know as well, Colin Henry is here and he was writing things down furiously. So your cards are marked, Helene, now. He's looking at these scores, okay? Okay, I would now like to welcome Grace Rothwell, the National Director of Access and Integration, and Dr. Eve Stanley, if they come up, please, just to present the awards, if we have them here. Can I present them from here? So we're going to present the awards here. And again, remember we asked you to look at the scan your lanyard. The first group are the second prize winners, but they have interesting, varied and excellent presentations. We'd like you to see them. So I'd like to call the representatives from the Beaumont Care and the Home. Don't delay, get home today. If they come up here, please. Thank you. Well done. Congratulations. If I can call the representatives from Mallow General Hospital for their project on increasing utilisation of an existing inpatient flow pathway to a Model 2 hospital. Okay. Congratulations. And next, I'd like to welcome representatives from Radiography Department at University Hospital Waterford to receive their prize on implementation of a radiographer-led PICC insertion service. Congratulations. And we're off to Letterkenny next. The Letterkenny Pathfinder service, if they come up here to receive their prize for their project, bedside blood testing with intervention treatment to eliminate need for ED conveyance for older people. Well done. And next, I'd like to welcome representatives from the team at St Vincent's University Hospital to the stage for their project on the Acute Medical Unit Cardiac Monitoring Service. So congratulations again to St Vincent's University Hospital. They're getting the reward. Next, if we get the representatives from the team at St Luke's General Hospital for their project, Visual Hospital Patient Flow Improvements. You have that group there. Congratulations, St Luke's. Okay. And I've just been reminded by Robbie, if you didn't get your photographs at lunchtime, there is still time, makeup, lights, everything. So make sure you go outside afterwards and get your photograph taken as well. Thank you. Our next group is the team from Kerry Community Mental Health Services for their initiative, Specialist Mental Health Assessment, Single Point of Access Hub. We're representing Kerry. Well done. Congratulations to the team from Kerry. And if we can get our team from Roscommon University Hospital on their bed utilisation study, Roscommon University Hospital, if you can come up as well, please. Well done. Congratulations, Celine. Well done. Okay. And I'd also like to get the representatives from the team at Mercy University Hospital on their hospital-based community outreach team for frail older adults. If you can make yourselves known, please. Thank you. Congratulations. And the next is the representatives from the Health Intelligence Unit on the Integrated Service Model Programme. Congratulations. And our final prize winners in this section were the IPATS nurse-led repatriation service with the National Ambulance Service. Now, unfortunately, a representative wasn't available to attend today. However, I would encourage you to read their excellent project synopsis on the conference webpage. It's an excellent initiative. And again, the link is on your lanyard as well. So thank you very much. So congratulations to all those winners. Now, our first prize winner, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Kalali and team members on the integrated community-based pathways supporting acute hospital admission. Dr. Kalali, congratulations. And if we could welcome Dr. Anne-Marie O'Flynn and her team members on the new care pathway to enable ambulances transfer patients to a Model 2 hospital medical assessment unit. Congratulations, Dr. O'Flynn. And if I can get Ido Shaughnessy and any of the other team members from the UHL Age-Friendly Healthcare in the Midwest, the Geriatric Emergency Medicine Unit. So Ida and her team are there. Congratulations, Ida. And in this group, it would appear blessed amongst women is Dr. Robert Briggs and any other team members for the Emergency Department Falls Service. Congratulations, Dr. Briggs and your team. If I can call up Breed Crennan again and any other team members from St. Luke's General Hospital on their initiative on improving patient experience times in the ED. Congratulations, Breed. And finally, again, I'd like to call Helene Horsnell and any other team members on their project on the model in the West and Northwest. Congratulations. Well done. And those and any prize winners, again, if you haven't had your photograph formally taken outside, please arrange it as well. And thank you very much to our colleagues who presented there as well. Now, we started off with the CEO of the HSE. I'm delighted to welcome the Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Callum Henry, and he'll be summarising, I suppose, some of the key messages of today and, I suppose, talking about the ongoing support and actioning of improved patient flow. Dr. Callum Henry, thank you very much. I would urge you to go up that way. You're more valuable than I am, okay? So.
Thank you very much. I won't be long because Grace has warned me not to be very long, so the thumbs are up. So look, I'm just going to go through some focus points of why we're all here. And just in advance, I want to acknowledge the work of everybody here today and thank you for everything you do. And to thank the conference organisers, and if I could mention in particular Mike, who brings such energy, passion and commitment, and such a pity, and our thoughts are all with him today on this sad day for him with his father's loss. But it's this movement requires leaders, and he's one of our greatest leaders when it comes to that, as I said, passion and commitment. So just to go through our current problems, I will be quick. We often talk about unscheduled care, focusing on hospitals. What we forget to do, and when we were held accountable, Grace, Andy, myself, and other people are held accountable, it's always framed around snapshots of experience in the emergency department. What we forget is the great majority of care is given out in the community of acute care. And that's important because patients need quick, timely access to acute care in the community. And that means 29 million consultations every year by GPs. And it means 1 million out of hours. We have to keep that moving. We have to keep that as responsive, because without that, that activity tips over into hospitals. So when we talk about unscheduled care, it's a continuum from community to hospitals and back out again. The data to date, I'm sure you've seen this already, is showing a steady rise, and these are national weekly ED attendances, all ages, 2018 to now. There was a big dip in 2020 for reasons we all know. Admissions, likewise. What is driving this? What is driving this is largely the steeper curve of older people. So when we look compared to 2019, the increase in people over 75% into emergency departments, it's up 30% plus. And that increase is going beyond demographic trends. And we know, for example, in CUH compared to last year, the over 75 presentations, again, upwards of 12-14%, way beyond the demographic expansion. And that's only going to go one way. And we also know that most of these people coming, if you look at their triage categories, need emergency care. They're categorized 1, 2, or 3, about 80% of them. So they're coming in sick and they need attention. And when you then look at how, what does that translate to? What we see is, if you look at that quite busy graph, is that at the end, on the right-hand side of the graph, which represents the bed utilization per age, is that there's a rapid upslope in terms of bed utilization for older people. So people 75 plus comprise about 12% of the population. They comprise about 26-27% of admissions, and they comprise about 55-56% of bed days. So the problem we face now is that we have a configuration of unscheduled care, which is a particular pinch point in the whole pathway of acute care, which is poorly configured for the needs of older people. And the numbers that we were talking about here have got to such a level that we can't stand by a line that says that the business of older people is somebody else's. The business of care for older people and scheduled care is everyone's business. And if you are here today, or for anyone you know in your own departments are working on scheduled care and says the business of older people is not my business, then they shouldn't be on scheduled care unless they're working in the paediatric department. So Sláinte Care is our guidance. We know what it stands for. It stands for creating service in the community. The international evidence, does this displace activities in the hospitals? We don't know, but as we create these 30 ICPOB hubs and those 30 chronic disease hubs, we know that at the very least they'll address previous unmet need. But we also need them to be responsive to same-day consultation. We know about 10 to 12% of people presenting to our ICPOB hubs are same-day consultation or next day, and we need them to be of a certain level that corresponds to hospital activity. And we know from the ICPOB data that a high proportion of people presenting there are frail people. So what we're on a journey of doing is building those services out in the community as a viable alternative earlier in the disease cycle for people with chronic disease and for those who are older people who need attention to. And in parallel, building up supports in the community that enable people to be sent home safely. The problem statements, you're familiar with these, weekend effects, discharge to community, rising ED attendance demographics, all these operation for rising lengths of stay demographics, all these, there's lots of problems that are driving those figures that show those graphs up. And when you look at these bubbles of the varying sizes, it almost seems impossible. And as a quote from Ken Rockwood, if we design services for people with only one thing wrong at once, but people with many things turn up, the fault is not with the users, but the service. Yet all too often these patients are labelled as inappropriate and present as a problem. So we have a configuration of unscheduled care which is suited to one particular problem, and yet more and more people presenting to that very setting have complex problems with an interplay with functional decline or abrupt functional deterioration secondary to protracted stays in emergency departments. Just to focus on older people, we have some fairly shameful figures in past years, and I'm glad to see so much improvement described here today, focusing on the needs of older people. We know in 2022, I think it was, Emer, we had 22,000 people over the age of 75 who stayed longer than 24 hours on a trolley, which is extraordinary when you think about it. The year to date, that's at 14,000. There has been a marked decline, a particular focus on this by teams. And I want to acknowledge not just the leadership nationally, but more particularly the leadership locally, for making this a priority for everybody. The experience of older people in emergency departments isn't that of preserve of specialist teams, it's everybody's concern. The impacts of today, I want to speak about harm in two ways, or three ways really. First of all, the harm is self-evident. You don't need a study, or you shouldn't need a study to tell you that somebody who's lying on a trolley who's older, that it's going to do harm to them. The studies show that, in case there's any people who resist that undeniable logic. There are studies, there are most recently a French study that shows a 40% increase in mortality in people over 75 who wait over 24 hours. What I can tell you is is looking at the other angle, and some of us here deal with what we call very blandly adverse events in emergency department. What I can't see is when they happen, when there's a serious adverse event up to including death in emergency department, and their investigations carried out, the sense of regret and remorse from people throughout the hospital who feel they could have done something or they could have helped is huge. Likewise, if somebody rings any of you and say, somebody I know is languishing, is there anything you can do to help? Of course, you'll try anything to help. And the message for today is everybody can help. It's not just for somebody else. And we can all help as healthcare workers by getting vaccinated. That's a very clear message, and that includes all professions, because the more of us are vaccinated, the less of our patients will catch flu or COVID-19 from us. We can all help by being involved in the relevant rotas. And Grace and I have discussed this. It's not just about emergency department consultants, it's about people, general medical rotas. What's everybody's job, those who are trained in general medicine or those who are on rosters supporting general medicine? What are they doing to support the experience, the negative experience, and the threat to safety of patients in the emergency department? It's everyone's job. And I've heard Grace say before, it becomes easier. If everybody helps, it becomes a little easier for everybody. If a lot of people don't help, it becomes an awful lot harder for a smaller bunch of people. It's everybody's job. The need for change. What are the patients telling us? This is the National Patient Experience Survey 2022, emergency department, not enough privacy for many people. For those who waited over 12 hours, as if we needed to hear this, it's a very frightening place and a terrifying experience. And discharge right through the hospital experience. We got missed messages. The care is good. Sometimes the information and communication is not so good. We also know and acknowledge Emer and our colleagues in this is that for older people, the very experience of being in hospital, regardless of what your condition is, actually brings deterioration. So being in a hospital, protracted stay in the trolleys and a protracted stay in a hospital is not good for your health if you don't need to be there. So needless protracted stays in hospitals, needless protracted stays in emergency departments run the risk not just of something we can measure very, very precisely like healthcare-associated infection, but it also is a threat to patients in terms of hospital-associated disability or decline. And this is a phenomenon we notice more and more among older people. I mentioned Stauncher Care earlier, and again to acknowledge the work of our own older people's programme in trying to pivot our system to look at what's important to older people: medication, mobility, mentation. How do we pivot a non-scheduled care system to address what matters to older people? These figures we talk about, the metrics, the point-in-time metrics, the trolleys, the stays, the hours of trolleys, all should have a line back to what matters to older people and what matters to patients who are waiting in emergency departments. Critical success factors. I was taking notes because some of these. It's interesting to see how much in some of these successful interventions depended. Data is such an awful term. We call it useful information. In identifying useful information to enable decisions to be made by the right people, whether it's radiologists understanding why a test is required, or where somebody's waiting, that somebody for whom the test is requested is actually waiting in a trolley as opposed to out in the community. So useful information to enable the right decisions to be made in interest. Empowering staff to make the right decisions. We saw how powerful that was during the pandemic. Knowledge networks such as this one and e-health solutions, and just to touch on one of them here. And this is by no means an answer, but virtual wards, all kinds of innovative solutions to address, to create alternative pathways for people rather than stays funneling through the emergency department. And to date, in England and Wales, there have been 11,000 virtual ward beds. Now, the evaluation of those is a mixed picture. For those for whom admission is genuinely avoided, it's an alternative, reduces the risk of infection. But for older, frailer people, it's something else we need. It's not just a gadget at home with a monitor. It's supports at home. And we've spoken recently, even myself, to the Deputy CMO in Scotland, who happens to be a geriatrician, who set up a 500-bed plus initiative called Hospital at Home, and it's quite successful. It's labour intensive. Yes, it fails, or 25% go on to get admission, but it provides supports for people up to a certain level of care to enable them to stay at home rather than enter hospital needlessly and also suffer hospital-associated disability. So a call to action, this is everybody's business. If everybody plays a part, then it gets a little easier for everybody. If people opt out of supported rosters, if their specialist rosters don't support the flow of patients through hospital, then it becomes harder for everybody. And as I said, this all funnels through to the experience of people. And to repeat that last story before I end, that when things do go wrong, and of course they go wrong, it's a high risk environment. The reaction I see more than anything else in people is, I wish I'd been there to help, or I wish I would have known what to do. And yet those conditions prevail for too many people in our hospital system. So, Grace, I hope that was short enough. I'll hand over to you now. Okay, next week.
Colin, thank you for having my phone. Thank you very much, Colin. Thank you, Colin, thank you for the wonderful summary, and I suppose that analysis of sorry, I didn't say sermon, I said summary. Okay. But just a good analysis in terms of what HSE are trying to do overall and how that fits in with their own objectives as well. Our final speaker, I'd like to introduce Grace Rothwell, the National Director of Access and Integration, and she's going to speak from our very full and very colourful digital board. Thank you very much, Grace.
You spoke to us about phrase, the example phrase, had it did my tongue, the currency of time. So the currency of time. So the currency of time, let's just think about that in terms of what happened today. So we had a lot of fabulous speakers, a lot of people from the system ourselves, and I myself am a firm believer in our staff, and I've said it millions of times. Staff are our greatest resource. Staff working in teams are just fantastic. And I think the evidence of that is here today, both in terms of the actual prize winners, but really everybody here is a winner. And everybody that works in the system and looks after patients every day and gets up in the morning and despite whatever they have going on, goes to work, sets out to do their best, maybe stays that minute or two or hour or two longer than we actually should. So that's it again, the currency of time. When we heard Catherine, and Catherine was very moving today, and it's amazing. I lost my own dad in 2022, and we think of Mike today in the same story. And sometimes when that happens, when there's a personal impact, it just resonates that bit more and more. And we think again about the currency of time. Catherine was able to bring out the goods and bring out the not so goods, but they remembered the HCA that put the towel on the radiator and warmed it about her dad Pat when he was washing him. So little things, again, the currency of time. A wicked and deadly problem is written here, and there's another phrase, and I'm not one for the big phrases. And we remembered earlier, he was a former colleague of mine, actually, Willie Reddy, and he was a great man for the phrases. Wicked and deadly problem. Rising tide was another one. Sonia remembered them all, but he had a lot of those phrases. But Willie was very passionate about patient flow. He really was. And I myself actually am just so passionate about patient flow, and I hear all the different projects, all the different things people are doing. And there's not one more important than the other, because the system as a whole is not a one size fits all. And that's what the message I'm trying to give to the national system at the moment. This is my 30th year in the health service. And I started as a grade 4, and I'm a national director today. It took me a long time to get there. But there's nothing like lived experience, working with people, working with teams. And this is such a team effort. It really is. And it's that much of a team effort that you need the B team and the C team and the D team, because the A team can't keep going all the time. We used to have a joke going in Waterford when I was in it about the A team and the B team. And we used to joke about where we were on a Monday morning, the B team was on or the A team was on. But it's all healthy competition, and it is about keeping morale up, because people are tired, and people are tireder now. I know there's gaps up and down the length and breadth of the country, but we have to stay going for our patients and their families, because they need us at their times of vulnerability. The urgent and emergency care, it's all there. Burnout, low morale, talking about silos, whole systems approach. So Sláinte Care, our new structures, This is our time. This is the time to get this right. This is the time to make sure that services are integrated. Fabulous stuff going on in the community. I spent the majority of my career in acute hospitals. I also spent some time in the community. I can see the opportunities to join the dots. And now is the time to do that. We have appointed 6 regional executive officers and 21 IHAs. I never get the number right. This is the time now to make sure that systems become integrated for the betterment of services, for improved care, enhanced care, improved outcomes for patients, and to make staff's lives that bit better. You know, why is it down to the hospital is the only place available on a Friday night at 11:10? You know, we can't close the doors in hospitals. So now is a time to make sure that our services meet the needs of people and equally support our staff and enable staff to actually go home at the end of the day and have some time off. I think that's very important. Some absolutely Shirley in Tullamore, and I've met Shirley in Tullamore, and I mean, every message she conveyed, I would concur with. Similarly, Breed in Kilkenny. I'm from Kilkenny myself, so delighted to see the Kilkenny people here today. But there is nothing like lived experience. There's nothing like the care that our staff deliver every single day. We often only hear about, you know, the things that do happen, but I'm a firm believer that nobody gets up in the morning and sets out to do harm. You might just ping to my slides there. They're very short and sweet. But I have to say, congrats to Robin. This is absolutely fantastic. And everything here, the 4 pillars really, all of these things here in some shape or form are part of the 4 pillars. So it is always about the 4 pillars. It's about the pre-hospital, the pre-ED, before you get in the ED, up the house, on discharge, safe and timely to whatever location you're going. And I think, again, if we go back to Catherine earlier, there was lots of things she reminded us of in the context of getting dad home. Next one, Barry.
Yep.
Okay, that one they left in, even though I didn't really want to talk about it. But again, it's the same thing, you know. Like I could put in 100 more circles into that. But let's all work together. Let's thank each other on the way home and say we do a good job. We enjoyed our day out today. We've picked up a few nuggets. We got to network, and everybody will learn something. As I said, I'm 30 years in the health service now, and I do learn something new every day. I thought there was some lovely phrases today that people referred to, you know, their dad or their uncle said, which is quite remarkable, isn't it? They were very sane and wise people, really. You know, we need to think about that. And the next slide. Okay, yeah. So we need to thank the organisers for today, and obviously a moment for Mike and his family at the moment. Willie's picture was up earlier, so we remember Willie. But a thank you to all of the speakers, all of the prize winners. And as I said, everybody's a winner, and I sincerely mean that. And a thanks to the team that supported Mike and the HSE team in pulling out today. A thanks to the venue. And I thought the lunch was exceptional. So thanks to everybody involved and our colleagues down the back on the getting the presentations, the sound, and to Barry from Tullamore. Is it Tullamore you're from?
Tubber, but we won't fight about it, okay?
What's the name of I passed it actually the other day. Shane Lowry's pub, the Brew and Tap, is it?
Yes, that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Lovely
You
pub.
just went by, did you?
Yeah.
You didn't go in, no?
And this is my final slide. And I used to say this every day. So this is Punxsutawney Phil. I had a good job trying to spell it, but that is what the health service is like. That is what it's like. It is like Groundhog Day because you get up the next morning and you have to do exactly the same thing again. But the benefits in that is, and I suppose what motivates people, in my opinion, is the multiples of success stories that happen every single day. That's what you do. That's what you do it for, you know. And people and their families are so grateful. Go back to Catherine again and the girl, the catering staff, I'd say, who actually went and made the cocoa. They didn't have the cocoa, but Catherine brought in the cocoa and the girl made the cocoa. So again, we remember the currency of time and how we actually manage our day to day, how we interact, how we actually reflect then at the end of the day. So well done, everybody. Safe home. And I will be on the calls up and down the next length and breadth of the country, keeping it all on the road. But I suppose I have to say my only reason for doing that is patience. Okay? Thanks.
Grace, thank you very much. Thank you, Grace. Congratulations. Um, just just before we wrap up, just a couple of really quick things. This is the first time this event has been done sort of in person, and we would be just interested if maybe two or three people, if just put up your hand, there's a microphone. Is there one thing you take away from today? Just all the things that have happened since 9 o'clock this morning. Does anyone like to stick up their hand first and maybe give us no microphone needed? Energy, great. And just what's your own name? Catherine, will you make sure you come up here afterwards for a minute, okay? Catherine, thank you very much. Anyone else? Inspiration. Can we more than one word? Inspiration. And lovely. And your own name is? Helen, you can come up here afterwards as well. And one more. Reassuring. Very good. And your own name is? Fiona, and just come up here afterwards as well, okay? Really quickly, okay? You're not in the naughty books, don't worry, okay? Guys, I just want to say two things really quickly. First of all, thank you very much to everyone here, and I'm particularly mindful of Michael O'Connor today and everything that happened. I mean, I only met the man briefly, but his enthusiasm and interest in this area, and it's just very sad what happened. But you know, it was such an event that was a credit to him. I do want to just thank Robin here. I mean, if you can see this is a remarkable visual representation of everything that was spoke today, and it was gone through in great detail there. But I mean, it's something Grace mentioned about. I think if you can look at that, and it will be available on the website and available to look at as well. I probably stand here as a civilian. I'm not a medical professional. I don't work for the HSE. I work in communications. But I will say two things, and I want you to really think about this. The next couple of weeks, we're electing our politicians. There is a tendency and there is a thread at pointing and blaming people, and everything is wrong, and there's a problem. I don't care what political party you vote for. I don't care what your politics are, but don't let people talk you down. Don't let people say, "Oh, look, the HSE is this or they're that." We saw today the stories, the energy, the enthusiasm, the ideas. You know, people at the smallest level, at the greatest level, wants to make differences. That's what has us here. Nobody is doing this job for the money. You're doing it to make a difference. Don't ever forget that. And if people, you know, are cynical the next couple of weeks for their own ends, ignore them. And I genuinely mean that. And somebody who works with politicians and works in that area, I can see it all the time. So just to be mindful of that. The only other thing I'd say to you is safe home. I know people, I met one woman here this morning who came from Donegal, and you know what they say, the furthest from church, closest to God. So they're usually the first ones here. Those of you who've come a long way, safe home, the best look at everything. My name is Barry McLaughlin. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you all today. And Jared, you've something you want to say as well, is it? How are you? There you go.
Actually, a message from Mike, and my name is Jared Gormley. I'm the head of the HSE Spark Innovation Programme. We're delighted to be working with the Patient Flow Academy and Mike. But he sent me a message to read, so he's thinking of us today. So I'm sure the day has gone very, very well, and we are stepping closer to a community of people that is an utter privilege to be associated with. Don Berwick, the inspirational quality improvement guru, says you don't get excellence from pieces, you get excellence from connections. I hope all you good people connected today and will continue to connect for the sake of our patients. The Patient Flow Academy objective is to bring people together, collaborate and share, to have a shared purpose, to build relationships and networks, to be laser focused on evidence-based interventions. I'm so grateful for the wise guidance of the Patient Flow Academy working group who have steered the direction for 2024. To InvestNet and Co for the superbly organised event, and to the people of the HSE and those in other health agencies for their collaboration. But most of all, I'm indebted to Lynn O'Toole, who has expertly managed every component of this project. She has meticulous attention to detail, passionate about the work and inspiration. Today wouldn't have happened without Lynn's attention, without question. And he would like to express his thanks to Lynn, and I think we have flowers somewhere for Lynn. So round of applause for Lynn.
No, congratulations to Lynn. Lynn's been driving this. Literally gave us the script the time, the date, and everything. I'm sure she even made the sandwiches at some point, you know. Lynn, thank you very much. Guys, keep an eye out for the next event. Congratulations and safe home. Thank you very much.